Alrighty, hi everyone. Elena, Christopher with HFS Research. Thank you for KPMG for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today. Our topic is on the successfully deploying automation, really managing that balance between technology and talent. When we discussed and came up with this topic, I think what really jumps out at me and what's really significant about this, that there's lots of different elements to it, but this is all about achieving success. So we want to try and have a practical conversation today. And I think as my panelists and I really spoke about what we wanted to try and do with this session, aside from be very practical, it was to start with a baseline, which is technology is very important to automation change, but there's also the elements of the people as well as the process. And so we really want to try and underscore that point today, that not just one of these elements is ever going to be the answer. It's really that point, sort of the integrated automation that my CEO, Phil First, was talking about earlier. So before we dive into the questions, I'll let everybody just quickly introduce themselves so you know who's who. Emily?
Hi, everybody. We met briefly yesterday. I, as Tracy mentioned, run our digital transformation strategic investments. And the way I simplify that is to think about we're helping companies solve problems in a way that's going to make them the best version of themselves or help them think about what do they want to be next.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Pallab. I head up partnerships at Google, specifically focusing on AI and working with the system integrators to help them build solutions on top of the Google Cloud Platform.
I'm Marc Wilson. I am co-founder and senior vice president of global partnerships at Appian. Appian is the recognized leader as a low-code platform for enterprise application construction, as well as one of the leaders in business process management, in case management. And really, I think the best way to describe what we do is allow the applications that leverage a lot of these complementary technologies to be built really, really quickly and at a really high level of complexity.
Hi, I'm Pat Geary, Chief Evangelist of Blue Prism. I joined Blue Prism in 2008 when we had 5 customers and 12 employees.
Super. Okay, thank you, panelists. So let's go ahead and kick it off with you, Emily. We've got a variety of interesting technologies on the technology companies represented on the panel, and you represent the advisory side. So when you're working with your clients, and they come to you perhaps asking about a technology or with some sort of objective at hand, how do you help them navigate this range of technologies? And let's be honest, do you actually ever start with the technology?
I think that's a loaded question, right?
Yeah, right.
For sure. So we don't. I mean, we want to help everybody get to the right answer for them. And starting with the technology, I think, is that human tendency to really want that silver bullet and the answer. And there's not going to be an answer for everyone. And so if somebody wants to start with the technology, we're really asking them to pause and take a look at what is it that they're looking to do, and how can the technology then enable and support that outcome they're looking for.
Yeah, I think it's a fair approach. Back to, we always tend to think of it as you perhaps need to have a good answer or multiple answers to the why of it all, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Pat, I want to move on to you. So I think for many of the technology companies represented here, you have somewhat of a concept of democratized IT. We've definitely heard that as a terminology in the marketplace, so much that I think it's bandied around. We might even give Blue Prism the respect of perhaps being arguably the first firm to actually create this terminology of democratized IT. Could you share with our group today, what does this actually mean, and why is this something worthwhile to strive for?
Well, I think I first set up our first user group back in 2009, and we only had 5 customers. But all of those customers, they were all business people. And all of them were there with a critical set of problems in their business. Their business was constipated by the inability to get things done, and the inability to automate and mechanize, what they were doing. So they were using people. The thing that they shared in common was that they understood what they had to solve. They weren't thinking, oh, I don't know what to do. They knew what to do. They just didn't have the technology, the capability, the tools to finish the job. They had to go to IT and get it built specifically. The economics didn't work. the amount of resources wouldn't work, and the change list was that deep, and the ability of the business to address it was that deep. So right back in those very early days, the idea of democratization was to say, how can we take that enormous long list of requirements for change, which were all created by the business? These are all business-driven requirements. Why wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually empower that business platform with a not gray IT, not macros, not things running on desktops, because that's just creating technical debt. It was something new. Could we give an enterprise quality, enterprise strength way of empowering, democratizing enterprise software and automation to that business community and letting them self-serve, but not breaking the company, not creating new technical debt, not creating audit risks, operational risks, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's been my journey, is watching our business users, and there's now over 100,000 who've been through our accreditation training, becoming real ninjas in very sophisticated automation technology.
That's a ninja being a technical term for certain.
Well, it was a black belt thing before,
Yeah.
you know. But the black belts, they design things. They didn't really build them themselves. Now we've got people who have an idea. They can test it. They can try it out. They can drag and drop incredibly exotic technology together, and put it in production. You know, this is the real change.
So it's a lot. So in other words, then it's all about the empowerment of the business, if you will.
Safely.
Safe. Okay, fair.
Yeah.
And so, Marc, this makes me think of something. Even in your intro, you're talking about how your firm, Appian, is known as for low code, no code. Blue Prism, you're essentially in the same boat. I mean, Google, within your cloud and AI sphere, you've designed a whole range of technologies that are meant to be very friendly to novice, i.e. non-data scientist types of users. But I think what's perhaps this idea of the low code, no code, playing off the concept of the democratization of IT, is that by enabling the business users, it somehow implies that you don't need IT. I'd really like you to address that for us. What is the right balance?
I think so much of this is in the eye of the beholder in terms of what you want. There's a spectrum of how applications get created, from true democratization of the front desk assistant deciding that he or she wants to rewrite a core process for a whole organization may not work as well as having them create an application that allows someone to register someone that might be coming in the front door. Whereas on the other end, you look at massive digital transformation initiatives where you're not talking about a few dozen, you're talking about a few hundred different applications that need to be overwhelmed. I think one of the things that we've seen is an inversion of the skills matrix with regards to really big digital transformation initiatives. In the past, you might have a few people at the high end working on functional requirements gatherings, and a lot of people, a busload of people on the bottom end, Java developers that show up that are going to spend the next 3 to 5 years trying to take what was figured out in the first 6 months and turn it into a piece of software that, of course, will work brilliantly, have no problems, and the requirements would not have changed over those 5 years. Today, with approaches that we're taking with things like low code, it's really about, can you get the beginnings of mission critical applications done in days and weeks? And can you have a smaller number of people that need to be hardcore coders, hardcore understanders of integration points, for example? And can you have more people that are directly engaged and involved in crafting what the process or the application or the user interfaces should look like today, knowing full well they might change in the afternoon and might change again tomorrow? So we see what we're doing along with Blue Prism and Google, very complementary technologies, close partners with Appian as well, of really being an orchestration center, that nerve center of how applications get created, which might leverage RPA to help with tasks that humans don't need to be involved in, repetitive tasks, or also be used as a way of integrating with older systems, as well as reaching midpoints in applications or beginning points or endpoints in applications where you need an effective, scalable AI machine learning environment that you can call out to. So, we view this constellation of vendors as integral to really effective transformation initiatives. I saw what Phil was talking about, that sort of confluence of different technologies coming together. The idea that you're going to have it all based on a single platform, I think is nonsensical going forward, but I think there's a lot of firms that still hold on to that thought.
And so applying that within the enterprise then, because part of what I take away from your comments is that it's, while some of the roles are changing, and we'll definitely come back to that reskilling topic, kind of that inversion of the pyramid of IT as we've thought of it over the years. But what I hear within your comments, though, is that there's a necessity to have them both. It's very much the balance, and I do think there's so much context that comes from the business side of things within that democratization.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think the agile wave, and we saw the headline of the new CEO report that's at all of our chairs as well. You know, we're out there in the market pushing our customers, along with KPMG, alongside of us, pushing our mutual customers and prospects to have their first applications done in 8 weeks. You don't have that by having a hard line between IT and business. The lines really need to be blurred. I mean, some of the best people in deploying the applications of tomorrow are the business user that thinks they know enough about technology, or the IT user that thinks they know enough about business to be dangerous. When you start drawing those walls and those lines, you're back in the mode of 3 to 5 year development cycles that really never work.
Yeah, that's not a fabulous timeline for change. All right, so transitioning slightly, Pallab, I want to go to you. So you're a partnership guy. You've done this for the better part of your career. You're with Wipro for many years, and now with Google. And part of my understanding of what you're doing at Google is you're working for cloud and their vast array of AI tools, but working with the systems integrator community. So given that part of our topic today is really talent, we'd love to hear a bit about why that role is so important, and how many of the enterprises perhaps in this room, and KPMG is a great example of this, about why those system integrator, those advisors, those service provider relationships are so critical to getting the right talent, so you can create solutions, so you can do things like bring together people, process, and technology.
Yeah, sure. And I'm glad you called that out. I mean, I spent a better part of my life in the other side, in the services business, so this gives me a unique perspective. So just to get into that answer, take a step back and talk about what within Google, especially within the AI world, do we think about on a day-to-day basis. And I'll try to always summarize in 3 so it's easier to assimilate and walk away with it. The three things that we worry about are, number one, how do we make Google's AI and automation be very useful and very easy to use, right? How do we make sure, for example, instead of worrying about how to move data into the platform to get you wonderful insights, why can't we move the model to where the data is? It's a very different way of thinking, but that's something that we're working on. Number 2, we are really, really serious about responsible AI. How do you explain AI in a much better way, make it more transparent? All the stuff that we heard from Swami yesterday, very relevant to us. And number 3 is, how do we continue to innovate like we always have done, not losing our sharp edge on that topic. Then we take these 3 dimensions and we talk about how we engage with the ecosystem. That'll take us to the question that you asked. Again, it's very unique in the sense that when I look at an ecosystem partnership, there are really 3 constituents. There is the constituent that we engage with by embracing open source very closely. So think TensorFlow, think Kubernetes, and so on. There's a lot that Google does in terms of contributing to the open source and embracing it internally, as well as encouraging others to do that. Secondly, with individuals out there, I don't know if you know, but there are about 2.9 million users, active users on Kaggle, and 1.9 million visit that every month. So there's a really active engagement going with the community in regards to individual data scientists. And then when I look at the third constituent, which is really enterprise, people in this room, how do we really engage with you? How do we really help you break down that skill gap? Again, we look at this world in 2 dimensions. There's a route to engagement with folks that are building stuff on AI, so the builders, right? And there the engagement is really about how do we enable you to build stuff, build solutions that become really impactful. And the idea and the approach there is to, first of all, have a very integrated platform, so you don't have to go looking for toolkits to build that model that you want to deliver to your customers. Number 2, ensure that you are able to use automation in a very significant way. So think about a world where you are able to just put in the data and there's an automated way to decide what's the best model that fits into that data. So that's kind of some of the things that we are doing in regards to engaging with builders. And the philosophy that drives that engagement is we are going to take to the market the building blocks that others can stitch to build solutions. We'll never get into the business of building end user applications for a particular industry. We leave that to system integrators to work out and build on. As for the business users, the idea is really to democratize, the keyword that you said there. And one of the things that we are banking big time on is AutoML. If any of you have heard about AutoML, the whole philosophy there is, throw the data at a machine learning model, which in turn will figure out what's the best fit model to be able to apply on the data to get inferences out of. It takes out a lot of complexity in regards to the data scientist's work in being able to evolve answers. So in short, there's a lot going on out there from a partnership perspective.
Yeah, and coming up with interesting ways to curate all of it. I mean, even on the stage itself, we have a pretty interesting motley crew of complementary tech and solutions and an advisor to help tie it all together. I want to talk a little bit now about scale. This is a big topic that we hear in the marketplace, particularly when it comes to intelligent automation. And so, Pat, I'll go to you on this one. I happened to be speaking at Blue Prism World a couple of weeks ago in Orlando, and I was talking with your CTO, David Moss, and we were talking about scale. And so he made a point to me that was something along the lines of, well, Elena, there's technology scale, and then there's organizational scale. So I'm going to turn this into a question for you by saying, as a software company, what's your view on your responsibility for helping your clients, your enterprises, achieve both of those? Because the tech is great, but to get to the scale, perhaps it's the rest of that equation, the people and the process. What's your responsibility for enabling that?
Well, that's really clear. I mean, the way that we make our money is the licensing of our digital workforce, our robots. And so the more value our customers get from it, the more robots they buy, the more capacity they need, because they're doing good work with it. So it's in our interest and our partner ecosystem's interest to help our clients to get the maximum value, to sweat the robots, as we say. So we're not interested in just how many desktops we've got running, because that isn't RPA. As Phil made it very clear, that's our DA. It's attended automations doing a small amount of personal task orientation. It's not transformational. It really doesn't change anything. So if you have to think of it as a transformational change, and it is about getting the business as a whole, and there's companies within this organization, within this room today, that have got over 1,000 processes running on Blue Prism, big global brands. It's taken them several years to get to that stage. It is not a trivial thing to do. You can't just walk in one day and say, right, I'm going to download the robot. But here we go, right, there we've done. It's as much about organizational transformation as it is about technology. And so our customer success team is mostly, they're not technical people. They're business change people. And a lot of them actually are for our ex-clients that have helped to build large implementations over time. So John Thurkoff is our chief customer officer now. Jet, you may have heard of him. He was the head of transformation at Bank of New York Mellon. And he put in several hundred robots there. And when he goes and talks to our customers, it's not about technology, it's not about infrastructure, it's about people, change, cultural adoption, how to get the very top levels of the organization to say, this is how we're going to distribute this empowerment. But it cannot be in an anarchic democracy. It has to be in a managed democracy. So here are the guardrails, on the side of the 10-pin bowling, and you can bounce off them. But as long as you stay within the guide rails, and as long as you implement that globally across all your organizations, then there's a chance that you can connect that capacity to the problem. And if you've got the right toolkit as well, and the right operating model, as we call it, our robotic operating model, then really amazing things happen.
Sure. So in other words, there's a heavy incentive to do so. Marc, I'm wondering if you want to dive in on this question as well, also representing from a software perspective. Do you share Pat's perspective on that?
Oh, I mean, I think what's so interesting, the comparison points and the complementary points between Blue Prism and Appian, it gives you two sides, two perspectives on it. We enjoyed, for example, being named Blue Prism's Technology Partner of the Year a couple weeks ago at Blue Prism World, but we look at it differently. He's focused on the bots that he's getting in. We're focused on the people that are working, that are doing things. And that perspective has got us into situations where for our mission is to make those people's job easier with the systems that they interact with. And it starts with things like picking first projects and really trying to get something done that can be done quickly, trying to use typical agile approaches of the modern way of chunking it down to smaller projects, not looking again for those 3 to 5 year projects or even those 6-month projects. How can you make them smaller? One of the things that we found is that if you can improve the ability for individuals to get access not just to people, process, and technology, I throw data in there as well, the speed with which they can take action actually opens up, again, those hours that contributed back to the company that the company can do innovative things with too. So what we're trying to do is to bring together data and process as well. So it's not just, gee, I can click the link really quickly that says yes and everything gets done for me. It's how do I make sure I have everything that I need to make that decision more effective in that spot. And I think that's really, to use sort of other technology descriptions here, that's the evolution of going from business process management, where it's really about managing tasks, to really being a application platform where it's data and process together so decisions can be made quicker. And of course, the technologies we're talking about today all help that. RPA can help with that, AI can help with that, to bring data and decision making to be much more efficient.
Yeah, so not achieved, it's not the end, but it's the enabler. And so as I listened to your response, Pat, and your response, Marc, and Pallab, as I listened to some of your comments, it just reminds me that, I mean, even on this stage alone, it's a lot of new tech. It's a lot of capabilities for any enterprise to assimilate and to make sense of. And so we've all heard that change management is a really, really critical concept, but I think it gets interpreted in different ways. There's IT change, there's organizational change, as we were talking about. Emily, I'd like to go to you on this one, particularly in your role as an advisor for digital transformation. Is there a new type of change management that's emerging or evolving, a digital change management? What do you think?
I think the change management protocols that we're all familiar with still exist. I think it is a little bit different. We've talked about skill sets, we've talked about behaviors. It's really changing a mindset within the organization to make this outcome that you're looking for possible. One of the things that we see that's a little bit scary for folks too is, how do I scope this change? It's a little bit different than I've done maybe with an IT project in the past. And to make it more practical probably for all of us, we take a look at scope and say, if my objective is an airline, I want to improve my customer experience. I need to look at those moments that matter to my customer and identify that as my scope to make sure that I'm giving the attention to the right things with the right effort and energy. And I'm not wasting my time, because this is an area where it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole or to spend time on things you don't intend to. So for me, for example, moments that matter, many of us, it's going to be buying my ticket, it's boarding the plane, it's exiting the plane and getting my luggage. It's not ever about what salad dressing is offered and what meal options there are, right? So you wouldn't want to intentionally focus in a space like that. And I think that scope definition is something that's even more critical when we're talking about this type of change.
Yeah, so definitely an evolution. I like your point about how because it's not that the baseline concepts have gone away, they're just being complemented with a broader purview that we have to consider. And that, again, going back to even the question I asked you, Pallab, around the importance of and the role of the systems integrators and the broad services community, is just a lot of that expertise to help enterprises curate and figure out how to get the job done. Yeah. Okay, so in our last few minutes here, I want to just very directly take the talent topic on from two perspectives. On one hand, there's access to the talent that you need, and then on the other hand, there's those that are impacted by automation. So Pallab, I want to go to you on this one. So particularly with your focus on the AI realm. And so we hear stats in the marketplace. Like last year, LinkedIn had something out there that was like there's a lack of 150 data scientists. There are open jobs that'll never be filled. I think the recruiting company Indeed put out a study at the beginning of this year. We've had a 300 and almost 50% increase in the demand for data scientists. So I'd like some of your thoughts on how do you help enterprises actually prepare for this? I mean, you mentioned AutoML. Is it making it simpler to use? Do we still need data scientists? What's the answer here?
Yeah, so I think, again, stepping back a little bit, if we look at what we all talked about last 2 days, digital, and we try to decompose that, it's made a lot of by more application modernization. How do you build modern applications? There's obviously the whole realm of feeding great data and great intelligence into those applications. And there's always this the ubiquitous need of great UI to consume those applications. And forgetting about the complexity that you deal with about org design and change management, I think there's a whole lot out there, and unfortunately, all of them need talented people. So at least from the stats that we look at every day, we think there are about 10,000 really deep learning researchers, if you want to call it that way, in the world. Our stats tell us that there are roughly around 10 million odd analysts, or you could call them even data scientists. And there are probably about 23 million developers. And this is surrounded by about 100 million odd business users. These are stats that we look at on a daily basis. They're right on top of my head. And so the approach that we are taking is, when you think about AI and you're thinking about expanding the talent pool, don't just look at those 10,000 or the 10 million. Can you look at this entire universal set of 100 million business users and developers and data scientists and researchers, and make it easy for a huge constituent of them to become contributors to AI. And that's where AutoML, again, plays a big part in that. I mean, we launched AutoML Vision last year and followed by AutoML Speech and AutoML Translation. And this year we did AutoML Tables, which allows you to take structured data now. So if you're looking at inventory optimization and trying to think through what model should I use to figure out what's the most optimized way to manage my inventory, don't bother, just throw the data at AutoML, and that's going to turn back to you certain options. And you have the luxury of seeing what's driving the choice of options, as well as deciding which factors should play a role and which shouldn't. It makes the task of getting output out of AI in a much more simpler and a lot more intuitive, a lot more accessible than those 10,000 researchers or the 10 million data scientists.
Interesting. It strikes me that that's essentially a continuation of this concept of the democratization.
Democratization,
Well,
got it.
not to put the data scientists out of work, but we need an ability for this to span out within the organization to support the embrace of it. So let's go to Marc, I want to go back to the point that you mentioned earlier about it was in the context of IT and business, but you talked about how the pyramid is changing, it's almost inverting. We know from a lot of our research that enterprises are saying, you're telling us that you want to reskill many of those folks that are being impacted by automation. But I'm curious in your experience if that's really possible, but B, part of what I think your concept of inverting that pyramid of perhaps traditional IT skills, it also makes me wonder if what we're really looking for there's a whole emergence of new skills that are needed. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Oh, I think that definitely that's the case. And I think that we have seen in the market, in our own recruiting, that the ability to take advantage of raw talent in there and reskill them in new ways is pretty clear. I think similar to the point that you made, one of our emphases is trying to make it easier every single day to build whatever you built yesterday. So we have this concept that we call the inverse Moore's law, that whatever it takes to build an application this year, 2 years from now, it should take half the amount of time. And that doesn't mean that there's a whole new feature sets that are there. It just means that the way in which you build needs to be that much easier. Places you might have scripted, maybe now it's point and click. Things that used to be take an hour, maybe they can automatically be generated with structures that might take 2 minutes. But we're seeing a lot of analysts now come in as ones who could potentially build applications. And to some extent, it's because I think people are thinking in that fashion as they're exposed to more technology, not just in their office, but more so in their daily lives as well. As we sit there and stare at our phones, we're all trying to figure out how we can come up with our own ways to improve our own processes. And I think that skill set's starting to show up in the offices as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a mindset that lends itself to Because we all know that some of the best ideas come from those who are actually running the processes at hand, to think about, this is broken, I want to try and fix it. To some of the points we heard before, certainly from Phil, just talking about how it's not just trying to, as I think of it, as paving the cart path to do things the same way that we always have, but to have the depth of knowledge and experience in a process to say, hey, let's try this a whole different way that's perhaps even more effective. All right, so I know we're almost out of time here, so I'd like to finish with what I like to call the lightning round, which is, we all know that this whole conversation, and really this whole event, none of this matters unless enterprises are achieving success in what they're trying to do here. So I'd like to, and Pat, we'll start with you down on the end here, and we'll just do an across the board. Please leave our audience with your best actionable recommendation for how to achieve success with automation. On your mark, get set, go.
Empower the people that are closest to the problem, but give them the guardrails and the security and the audit and the governance that mean that they don't break your business while they're solving the problems.
Try to build something today. Don't wait. Experiment, fail, try again.
Start with the end in mind and get all the people involved, make that the North Star. Technology becomes incidental then.
Yeah, and I think it's to get over that hesitation. It's be bold. Go ahead and get started. Be big in your thinking. I know a lot of us look for that clarity before we start, and we're trying to put so much into our planning. So that clarity is going to come after you get started. So I think it's go ahead and get started on it.
Super. And I'll throw one into the mix, which is, I think the integration of tools is really, really important, but it's what I said at the onset and what I think we've echoed throughout the session today. It's, remember, the integration that's perhaps most important is your people, process, and technology. And maybe we'll throw Marc a bone here and say data as well, because we all know that that's so critical. All right, please join me in thanking our panelists today.